Leonardo was not only a genius, but also very human, quirky and obsessive, and playful and easily distracted, makes him more accessible. He was not graced with the type of brilliance that is completely unfathomable to us. Instead, he was self taught and willed his way to his genius. So even though we may never be able to match his talents, we can learn from him and try to be more like him. His life offers a wealth of lessons. Be curious, relentlessly curious.
Good afternoon. My name is Kyle Bojda. I'm a doctorate of physical therapy student at Florida Gulf Coast University, and I'm here today to talk about one of the books I recently read, which is a biography of Leonardo da Vinci written by Walter Isaacson. You might be familiar with some of Isaacson's previous work, such as Einstein and the biography of Steve Jobs, which also was a New York Times bestseller. However, this is Isaacson's first attempt to delve into the masterful, creative, genius mind of a Renaissance man such as Leonardo da Vinci. So I picked up this book in the first place simply because I figured there's a lot of life lessons to learn from a brilliant mind such as Leonardo da Vinci's. There's no denying that Da Vinci was kind of predisposed for greatness. Obviously, he has these neuronal activities that he's born with that greatly surpass my own. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of environmental factors that Da Vinci was able to control through attention to detail, enhancement of his own creativity, and just a genuine curiosity. And through implementing these strategies throughout his daily life, I think he was able to reach his full potential. By picking up this book, I think that I put myself in a position where I can pick up on his strategies and his behaviors and begin to implement them to my own life to reach my own potential. So I think one of the most remarkable personal characteristics of Leonardo da Vinci was his ability to remain genuinely curious throughout the entirety of his life. What's most commendable about this is that his curiosity didn't seek to please anybody else besides his own sake. So Isaacson talks about how resoundingly devoid of an ego he was. So, for example, Da Vinci wasn't a guy who painted the Mona Lisa so he could pick up chicks at a party, or he wasn't a guy who was posting his latest blueprints of a flying machine or any of his latest inventions on Instagram to get any sort of self-affirmation. This was a guy who genuinely was curious about many aspects of the universe, wanted to seek answers, and remained that way for the entirety of his life, for nobody else besides his own sake, which I find greatly commendable. So Isaacson says that Leonardo was relentless and admittedly random in his pursuit of curiosity. So what I found interesting is that Da Vinci would keep a daily to-do list, and in these to-do lists, he would write down anything that he felt he didn't have a true mastery of. So he really didn't limit himself with what he was pursuing. So everything from why people yawn, to methods of squaring a circle, to what makes the aortic valve close, to the mechanisms of the tongue of a woodpecker. Uh, Anything in the universe that Leonardo felt like he was not aware of, he would write down and go on a quest to seek that knowledge for his own self's sake. Um, I think this is a pretty positive characteristic and behavior to have. So I've actually begun keeping a little notebook myself. I hope nobody ever comes across this. It'd be pretty embarrassing because I've kind of just written down um, anything that I feel like I don't have a mastery of. For example, if I'm driving to campus and I hear somebody on the radio talk about something I don't know about, or if I'm in conversation and somebody mentions something I'm not quite familiar with, I'll eventually write it down. And in doing so, it kind of keeps me held accountable for seeking that knowledge on my own at some other time. In today's days, with the internet and the access of knowledge, there's really no excuse for being a self-driven learner. And by doing this, by having this habit, I feel like I keep myself held accountable for seeking knowledge, again, not for anybody else's sake, not to state facts at a dinner party to impress people, but just to draw upon all parallels of life and to really utilize all aspects of my brain. So another learnable and trainable characteristic that Leonardo exemplified was the art of observance. So Da Vinci was incredibly acute in his ability to go throughout his daily activity, paying close attention to all aspects of his surroundings and his environment. And in doing so, he was able to draw parallels that other people simply would miss. For example, he would walk through the garden and he would observe how dragonflies wings would motion in the air to keep them afloat. He would walk through town and watch people's emotions and their facial expressions and how this pertained to how they were feeling in that exact moment. And in doing so, he really put himself in the moment at all times, and this really was an upper hand for him to draw parallels through many, many aspects of his life. I think this is particularly important in today's day and age where we're consistently distracted by our phones and our pockets at all times. So we have this ability to have this dopamine rush of a cell phone by checking it consistently, by looking on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, getting a dopamine rush off of likes and things like that. And in doing so, a lot of us have developed this habit and sometimes even an addiction that really deters our ability to interact with our environment, the real world, our surroundings going around us at all times. We're kind of sucked into this phone world where we miss a lot of the intricacies of life. And in doing so, we not only take ourselves out of the moment, but we miss a lot of opportunities to learn from. And even though it should go without saying, Leonardo was an individual who had an incredible amount of respect for the facts. And as Isaacson puts it, he was fearless about changing his mind based on new information. So Da Vinci was an individual who would observe, he would experiment, and he would critically think, and he would consistently upgrade and adapt and evolve his worldview based off of his comprehension of the universe. I think in today's day and age, a lot of us kind of get stuck in our own little bubble, our own little worldviews. Even though it's important to have virtues and to have a sense of self, I think we also have to be open-minded and willing to upgrade our beliefs on the universe and everything going on in it as new information becomes available to us and as we seek out that information. Isaacson makes a quote in the book that I found pretty significant. He says, "Genius starts with individual brilliance. It requires singular vision, but executing it often entails working with others. Innovation is a team sport. Creativity is a collaborative endeavor." What I found interesting about Leonardo is that he wasn't one of these creative geniuses who was a hermit. He didn't isolate himself from the rest of society, and he didn't exclusively work by himself. Actually, a lot of his most profound work was done with friends or with collaborators. He was somebody who welcomed other people's input, other people's perspective, and he enjoyed working with other people. He was somebody who could go down into town and he would talk and engage with anybody, no matter their background or their socioeconomic situation. He was somebody who didn't necessarily put himself on a pedestal and act like he was too good for anybody else. And I think in doing so, Da Vinci really opened himself up to get a broader perspective and a broader range of ideas, and it really contributed to his work in the long run. I think of my career and my eventual career as a physical therapist, working with a team of others, working with a broad range of patients, doctors, physicians, nurses, occupational therapists, and I welcome that challenge to see things from other people's perspectives, to communicate and to work with others to the best of my ability, realizing that when you do that, when you open yourself up to work with others, you're really contributing to the greater good. And finally, if I could most simply quantify the persona of Leonardo da Vinci, I'd say that he was a man who defied all stereotypes. He wasn't a man who just was an artist. He wasn't just the creator of the Mona Lisa. He had a number of different pursuits and interests within the world. He consistently was challenging himself to see the world differently, and he saw the world with a multitude of different lenses. And in doing so, I think he was really able to draw upon both parallels of his brain to incorporate imagination with logic, to intertwine creativity with intuition, and to make connections between the arts and sciences. These are things that mere mortal men like ourselves simply could not see, and these are the characteristics that made Leonardo da Vinci such a revolutionary. And finally, I'm fortunate enough to pick up this book and to learn more about the insights, the intricacies of his brain and how he worked.